Yeah. Oh, can you fill me in? Let's talk about it.
Do you all want to introduce yourself?
Loran Lewis, let's do more CIC.
Lauren Batty, out loud.
Joe Sunderland, re-establish.
I'll just say it anyway, Phil Pierce from Life Experience. So we wanted to talk about sort of the work that you guys do and the people you work with. Do you want to just tell us a little bit specifically about what it is that you do?
Yeah. So I run a organization called Let's Do More CIC, founded by myself. Initially, the whole concept around it is raising aspirations. That's what the initial concept of it was. Along the line, I've changed the way that we get those outcomes. So initially, we were doing mentoring, especially working with young black boys, trying to raise aspiration, increase attainment, trying to encourage more black boys to go to university. But my background is sport, and I feel like I wasn't using my strengths really. So we decided to start using basketball. I've had a background with Leeds United Foundation, so I had a background in football primarily, but basketball was a sport that attracted the young people that I wanted to attract. So yeah, now we run a basketball club. We have one team six teams. One team's just been promoted to the second division of the National League for under 16s, and then we've got a group of other teams in the regional. So that's on paper what we do. We run basketball sessions, but again, reason why I'm sat here is that I do a lot more than just the basketball side of things. It's about what we do off the court.
I feel like you've been quite humble, like you're such an inspirational guy. So what you don't know is this guy went running every morning and did a live YouTube video, an Instagram video.
Yeah.
How many days did you do it?
It was 401 days. I forgot about it. It feels
Wow.
like I could use it now because of this lockdown week. But you know,
Wow.
you know, in the morning when you pick your phone up and you're just like, oh, I've got notifications, and it's like, oh, he's doing it again, and it made me feel lazy. Honestly, it's sort of one inspiration. It's just to show people that you can just do a little bit, or you can do as much as you want, as long as you do something.
Like I wanted to do because I wasn't a professional sportsman, or I hadn't done anything. Like I'd done a masters and things like that, but I hadn't done anything that I felt was extraordinary. So to have a organization called Let's Do More, I felt like I had to do something a bit extraordinary. So I thought, you know what, let me just do it. Like initially, I was only supposed to do it for 4 months, but then I carried on for 401 days.
What happened on the 402nd day?
400. Oh, that's a good question. It was New Year's Eve. It was New Year's Day.
You had a hangover?
Yeah. It was New Year's Day, so I think I was in bed. Like I spent the previous 401 days waking up at 5:30. So I had a line, but I felt wrong. I felt like I was cheating myself.
No, but do you know what? I've just discredited 401 days by asking about that 402nd.
Oh, yeah.
That 401 is a massive achievement.
Yeah, man. Yeah, but like I said, it was more to get myself prepared mentally for what I plan to do over the next 50 years. You know what I mean? Like, I just thought...
Were you tempted to stop when you got to 365, when you'd done a year, when it come to the sort of year anniversary of the first one? Was there a thought where you were like...
No, because I wanted to finish on New Year's Eve.
Right.
I had it in my head. Like, I started in November 2017. I didn't plan to do a year or 401 days. I just went with the flow. With a lot of things that I do, it's just people think I'm some calculated guy and that I have all these things in my brain. Like I just go with the flow. It just so happens things seem to fall into place for me. But I think that's more because of my positive attitude, and I don't really give up, more than me having some insight into
Your
anything.
consistency.
Yes,
you must be
there
a
we go.
consistent guy to do that.
Yeah. It's more about consistency, and that's why I did it really. To prepare myself.
Brilliant. And Lauren, do you want to tell us?
So I run a company that's called Out Loud. We're a creative and education company. My background's in drama. I'm the drama queen. So I've always used, as Lauren's talking about using sport as the vehicle of engagement, I've always used creativity, performing arts, drama and dance in particular as that vehicle of engagement. I've always had a passion for hard to reach groups, vulnerable people. So for me, I can't imagine working in spaces with people that are easy to reach. It sounds weird to even say that term, but I think that's part of where the drive come from. That we're a creative and education company, but we work with vulnerable groups that are hard to reach in other settings. We work mostly within the community, sometimes within an educational setting. We have quite a big focus on therapeutic work, so the interventions that we run are not just creative, but it's about bringing an element of therapeutic intervention so that we can actually try and change pathways, try and change futures, because as we all know around here, some of the work that we do with the groups that we work with, we're talking about generations that have lived a certain way. So then to uproot some of that stuff ain't going to happen easily. So I guess it's about that creativity with the kind of performance and creative background, but also bringing the therapeutic intervention and bringing them together to some of the groups that other organisations and other statutory agencies wouldn't find easy to work with.
Tell us about the prison lads.
So
That smile just says everything, doesn't
so we run a group in a community in Bradford, and we have a number of young people who have got family members in prison, dads in prison. So I suggested, it was actually through you guys coming in and some of the life experience guys sharing their experience about being in prison that opened up the conversation of prison experience with the kids. So I just suggested whether they wanted to write letters to their dads in prison.
Which they'd never
done.
They only ever spoke to them on actual visits, hadn't they?
Yeah. And a couple of the boys didn't want to, but one family in particular started to write the letters, and it was being a beautiful experience because firstly, the dad, before he got locked up, couldn't read or write, so he's learnt to read and write in prison. So that's great for him to then develop his literacy skills in this way. There was worries
one day, Kate, what if you do this and then he
doesn't write back?
Yeah, so it's that sort of putting their expectations a bit higher, thinking we're going to get a letter, but then he did.
Yeah, he wrote back. So we sent one letter within a matter of weeks. He'd wrote back, and I'd never wrote prison letters before. So like we made a card, we used glue to stick stuff on. Little did I know that stuff doesn't get through. But the letter got there, and Dad wrote back, and it has been the most beautiful exchange of every month, 6 weeks for the last 12 months, having them letters back and forth, and some of the stuff that are coming out in the letters, it's that kind of aspirational talks, between dad and son of, oh, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And, oh, you says you want to be a builder, so you can build a house for us. And, so it's been a really precious time, I guess. And now we've got little boxes in the centre that the boys keep their letters in. So again, it's like their kind of sacred time and space. And that's all happened really organically. It wasn't something that we planned to do. But again, as we all know, like being youth workers, you have to take the lead from the young people. So when they give you the carrot, you kind of take it and see what runs with it. And that's been something.
Has that continued through lockdown as well? Because if that wouldn't have been happening, the visits all got stopped.
Yeah, so they've not had any visits. The letters have been less regular, but still continued. And now that we've got engagement happening over the summer, it's definitely something that can continue further. And I think because one of the boys is really young, both of them are really young actually, but one in particular, I think it's helped him to process and understand what's going on, that dad is not at work, because that's the story that the kids get told, right? But actually they're starting to understand that dad is in prison and what that means. And, you know, again, it's that therapeutic element of just being able to explore that stuff in a really safe environment. So special.
Brilliant. And Joe, do you want to tell us a bit about what you do?
So I set up Re-Establish, which is a kind of small charity in South Leeds, in 2015. Very similarly to you guys, you know, like it's all to do with creating opportunities for change, for kids from areas of high deprivation that wouldn't have opportunities otherwise in the same way that they can do if they work with organisations like yourself or organisations like us. And I think, you know, and quite similarly, like we use sport and art to mainly, you know, as like, you know, alongside kind of mentoring and expedition, residentials, to kind of give kids the opportunities to come out themselves and to discover the fact that they've got really good qualities that are well worth investing in, and they are highly able and, you know, very capable. And, you know, it's the whole thing, isn't it, of expectation. And I think we all tend to live up to the expectations that other people have of our lives, and we have to learn to take hold of them ourselves and go, okay, so what do I expect? What do I want? What am I capable of? And I think it's creating those kind of spaces where kids can discover that they are actually, you know, amazing. And it's about enabling them to discover the depths of who they are, so that they can become all that they are, as opposed to live to expectations that are, you know, that give them a small world when they need to have a much bigger one.
And I think the standout thing of what you do is Sierra Leone.
So we run expeditions when we can to Sierra Leone. So we take local estate kids. It's a voluntary project that we run. So it started quite organically. Originally piloted it with a group of young people from a church on the other side of town. And then I started working with estate kids in South Leeds. And it was around the time of the G8 summit in Live 8, and we were just doing some detached work, and we had the youth bus out and we were chatting with the kids on the bus, and I said, well, if you ever had the opportunity to go, would you want to? And some of them were like, yeah. So I was like, all right. And so we got, you know, I've spent quite a lot of time in Africa. I spent a couple of years in Africa. I love it. And I have learnt so much, you know, spending time in different environments, different countries around Africa. And it was a hugely educational experience for me. And it was really rich in lots of ways. I learnt so much about myself, mainly what I didn't know, and how much I had to learn and have to learn, and I learned so much being there. So we've taken, you know, 43 young people, in different, obviously not all together, to Sierra Leone over the last few years, and they have to do, you know, be involved in all the fundraising, and some kids have come back more than once, and trained up as young leaders. And one of the first young people from South Leeds that I ever took is now one of the trustees of Re-Establish.
Amazing.
Yeah, which I love. She is amazing. So yeah, I mean, it has been very educational and very much about all of us learning together. And there's so much richness in, you know, I've learned a lot more about. I've learned more about grace and forgiveness from spending time in Sierra Leone than I've ever learned anywhere in my life. So I always find it humbling, but I love it.
Yeah.
So it's fun, you know. It's fun.
Yeah, I've seen some of the pictures and videos of the stuff they do, and Joe's trying to get me to go, and I just think I'd be an emotional wreck.
Oh, you should go.
You know, watching some of the stuff that they do. But it's like playing with babies. Like, I don't know how to, like, if it's my niece or my nephew, I know what to do in there. But if it's like someone else's baby, I'd just be like, like, once you're older and you can run, I'll play football with you. But that whole, I don't know. I'm still.
You should totally come.
Yeah,
Like, we work a lot.
I'm still on the fence.
You should definitely come.
Let's do a joint trip.
Oh,
like,
yeah. All of us can go.
let's go. I think travel.
So changing
is...
the subject.
It's so important though, I think, for like enriching lives and expanding young people's world views of what they're capable of, and not just what they're capable of achieving, but also how other people live in other environments and
It's
learning
important.
about
Yeah,
culture and it's so important and so life enriching. You can't put a price on it actually. It's
Yeah, I think one of the big things that comes from it is how there's young people there that don't have the opportunity to get education, and they're trying everything they can to get education. And then we've got young people here who push back against going to school. And, there's young kids in other countries that don't have this available and they're begging for it. And you're, oh, well, I'm not too well, I'd rather be. And I think that's one of the biggest things to come out of that realization for young people about how privileged they are. It doesn't matter how low income family you're from, you've still a massive privilege compared to sort of other families in the world. So for me, for life experience, some of the biggest difficulties we face. I mean, funding's obviously one of the big things that all sort of charities and community interest companies face. Just that sort of continuity of work. What would you guys say is the worst thing about running your own CIC?
The funding bids for me.
Yeah.
I can't, if I could, I wish I could have a magic money tree. But
Yeah,
I try not to rely too much on funding bids. We try and get income from other ways. But yeah, sitting down and writing a funding bid and going through it and thinking in your head, oh, I've got to tick this box and everything like that. Because I know what I do, but it's just about articulating it on a piece of paper, which isn't. It's harder than some people would think. Like I work with about 200 young people each week. How do I put that on a piece of paper?
Yeah.
How what I do is affecting their life and improving their life for the better. You got to put the statistics in,
this is it, because you
LSOAs and
can't
things.
just
Yeah,
say
yeah,
I'm stopping them from committing crime, because they'll say, well, how do you know they wouldn't commit
exactly.
crime if?
Yeah.
And it's like, because I work with them and I know where they were when we met,
Yeah.
and I know what path they were going on,
Yeah.
and I've pulled them, and it's like, well, how can
It's
you prove
very, it's
that?
very hard, and it's hard. It's hard to show that. During the lockdown, for example, I'm not going to talk about the specific incidents, but I've had about 3 or 4 incidents with young people that have been coming to our session, but for 3 months there's been no session, so they've needed to find other ways to not or entertain themselves, but have an outlet. And unfortunately, it's resulted in some things that are not so good. But how do I show that if they had a basketball session, they wouldn't be doing that?
I suppose in that sense, that could work in your favour in a weird way, that if they're not getting into trouble while your sessions are running, and then lockdown happens and your sessions stop,
Yeah.
and now behaviours have changed.
Yeah, but there's so many other variables that you have
Yeah.
to fight with. They're locked in a house with their parents. You know what I mean? That they probably didn't get on with, for example. How do you know it's not that rather than your session? They're not getting their free school meals, which was happening at the start before they changed everything. There's so many other variables. You can't really say because of basketball they're not doing this. Even though you may think in your heart of hearts that's what it is. It's about trying to prove it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
And so for me, that's the most difficult thing for me. I wish I could just film all my sessions and just send it to funders. That would
Yeah.
be a lot easier because you'll see the types of kids that I'm interacting with. These are kids that sport is not as accessible for them as other kids in Leeds. Whether it's because of the money, the finances, the family background, or whatever it is. And I'm getting them all into a sports hall. So I wish I could just film it and just send it to you. It'll make my life a lot easier. So to answer your question, funding bids.
Right. Are you two similar? Do you think the way that we apply for and receive funding needs to change?
I think that it is. I mean, the stuff that we do is about long-term transformative change,
Yeah.
and funding bids are usually a year at a time.
Short term.
Yeah.
Short-term funding bids, and you can't do what we do short-term. It is about intergenerational, long-term commitment to an area, to families, to people, and so you do very much live. It can make it harder to pull in long-term teams, because your funding is always short-term. There are huge challenges to that side of things, definitely. It'll be interesting to see whether or not things changed coming out of lockdown and stuff like that. I think some of the smaller organisations on the ground have stepped up, and it will be interesting to see, what that looks like as we come out the other side. But it is a challenge.
Yeah.
And I think because, well, certainly for us, and I'm sure similarly to you guys, like if you run organisations, you do a lot. So you're juggling a lot of different, you don't have your own accountant, you don't have your own funding writer, you don't have this, you do everything. And so it's looking at how you can, maximise time, utilise all those kind of different opportunities to create opportunities without it. It's definitely a lifestyle, not a job, certainly for me.
Yeah. I think one of the challenges I struggle with that being a lifestyle and not a job, is carrying, we nurture so many young people and so many families that actually, how do you switch off from that stuff? Vicarious trauma in helping professions is a real thing. And when you're hearing other people's trauma constantly and picking up that, I think that's one of the challenges I find in how do you protect yourself enough to not burn out? How does it get to a point where you just think, this is too much? You're supporting families that have been wrapped up in all sorts of complex situations for 3 and 4 generations. So it's really easy for you to sit there and think, and what difference can I make, little old me, in the grand scheme of things? And I guess sometimes I find that witnessing what these little lives have got to witness and getting a little glimpse of their lives in the time that we work together can be so overwhelming sometimes that it can put me in a place of number one, not being able to switch off properly, which is where it's just a constant lifestyle. And then number 2, sometimes just thinking, actually, am I fighting a losing battle? And I always come back to that hope that actually that session that I delivered does have a lasting impact on that young person's life, whether it is the basketball session that's run or the other kind of arts and crafts activities or just the meal that I drop off at the parents' house or whatever, that these things do make a difference. But I think when we're presented with such bad situations that we're all kind of witnessing our young people live in, I find that quite overwhelming. Amongst all the day-to-day stuff of trying to run organisations and keep them afloat and how you get long-term funding and things, I think we're in professions that care, we're in professions that help. And I know for me, burnout is always only a close step away, you've got to be really
I think we're quite
conscious
lucky in
of
the
that.
sense that we've always delivered work on site. So we've never built sort of proper relationships with young people to that extent. And then when I started working with you two, it's sort of like
You too.
with
See how it
you
says
two,
that?
it's sort of so I've always said that I'm quite sort of blank to lots of situations because I spend my life meeting people who've come from prison who have either done horrendous things or had horrendous things done to them. And it's the whole, if you always watch scary movies, you're not going to find movies that scare you.
Yeah.
So people tell me stuff and I feel like I'm not empathetic at all because I'm just like, oh, okay. And they're used to the, no way. And I'm just so used to hearing these sort of horror stories of people's lives. And it's always, when I was young, this happened. But then working with you two, it's not a past story. It's things that people are living in today. It's situations that are happening on a daily basis now. And I completely get what you're both saying because you do feel that sort of, what can we do and how can we do it? Whereas usually I'm sort of coaching people on how to express their past rather than how to fix their current there now.
Yeah.
so yeah, so it is. It's really difficult, and that's why I think with the work we do with the spoken word, it's about how do I tell this story,
Yeah.
and it's about we did sessions last year in Bradford. We've done sessions today on spoken word in Leeds, and when it's frustrating because there's always pushback when you talk about poetry. And it's always like that thing you do at school, and it's been such a brilliant outlet for me that if I'm ever going through something, I can write about it, and then I can go and perform it on a stage to other people, and then it's out there, and it's not something that's just going on in my head anymore. And that's one of the things I absolutely love about the work I get to do. You sort of show up, you deliver something, you do some work, you do whatever you do, and then you leave. But like I say, working with the young people that you guys work with, it does have that sort of longer effect.
It has a huge long-term effect, and I think for me, once you know the things that you know and you've seen the things that you see, you can't go back.
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily. I'm not of a council estate. I'm from a white middle class background in South West London originally. But you can't go back once you've travelled or spent time in, areas of high deprivation or whatever you want to call them. For me, I love spending time in those environments. I live in one of those environments because I find it's real in that sense for me, and I love that tangibility. I got vicarious trauma from spending so much time in high-end environments. And I think you learn, I've had to work through that journey and figure out how to function far better in it, and for it to become more of a lifestyle, and because it can't just be a job, it doesn't work in that sense. But I think I've learned a lot about expectation in the middle of it. Like, I think I've learned loads about myself, and I think a lot about actually it's not my job really to fix things in that sense. It's to journey with people, and because I can't fix people.
Yeah.
And we can provide opportunities and give people the opportunity to take them, but I'm not responsible for whether or not they choose to. And so I think, and it's also, I've learned a lot about myself in terms of having hopes and expectations of some of, the kids that I've journeyed with for years, and I still have hopes for them, even when at points, they make choices that I wouldn't have chosen for them. But I think it is that whole thing of sometimes I have to remind myself what am I really asking? To ask a kid to change their world and to make different choices, and actually you are asking them to make different choices from every other generation that's gone before them. That's a massive thing,
Huge,
to become an outcast to a degree within their own, within their own world, to challenge their own social norms and all those different things in between. And so I'm always reminded of that in terms of, Joe, what are your expectations, and is that actually okay? And what is the reality of that from their perspective? What does that really look like? So I always kind of come back to that, I guess.
Yeah, that's really wise. Because I think sometimes we can. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I think I can change the world all the time. So it's like sometimes you're expecting these massive leaps, and actually it's like, them leaps take 5 years. Let's just come back to where we're at today. We had a girl last summer, and for weeks she'd just leave. She'd never say bye. She struggled with endings massively. And, I started to kind of call her out on it a little bit in the sense of saying, oh, you left without even saying bye yesterday. I wondered where you'd gone, And then she came to me at the end of a session and said, Loran, I'm going now. Bye, I'll see you tomorrow. I was like, nearly crying. And it seems like something so small. And I guess for people that don't work in our spaces, they would be like, yeah, big deal. But that was just such a massive thing.
It's
And
a little victory, isn't it?
yeah.
I think we sell ourselves short sometimes. As this is one thing I always tell people about working with young people, especially. They're not going to tell you how you affected their life. They're not going to thank you every 5 seconds. Sometimes you just have to take those little things that maybe they've changed a certain behavior. They won't tell you what you mean to them. I mean, if, for example, a basketball session, for example, they're not going to go to you every day and say, this is stopping me from going selling crack cocaine or cocaine down the street. They're not going to do that.
Yeah.
So you have to have a bit of not a thick skin, but you have to be aware that you're not going to, it's a thankless task that you're pursuing. You're not going to get thank yous. You're not going to get appreciation all the time. I've come to that conclusion. I've resided to that fact. I'm fine with that now. So I don't really get too strung up on if a young person doesn't seem to be verbally telling me how we're changing their
But
life.
do you see it in their actions? Do
Yeah,
you see
100%.
personality changes?
Yeah, 100%. I see it all the time, especially in sport. Because I work with boys. I'm hoping to try and work with a few more girls, but predominantly I work with boys. And a lot of the boys I work with, especially in that sporting mentality, it's very much, keep your emotions to yourself. You don't talk about your feelings or anything like that. And I'm probably the same. I was probably exactly the same when I was younger. But it's how do you see the little telltale signs? Are they turning up on time to a session? Where the fact
that's
that they're turning
massive.
up to a session,
Yeah.
that could be a way of them saying you, okay, I respect you, I respect your time, I respect you putting the work in for me. So that's what I see. If I see a kid that I know doesn't turn on time for school, probably goes home late and things like that. If they turn on time to one of my sessions, I think, okay, cool, that's a victory. I'll put that in the victory box. If they, I don't know, if they tell you a bit about their personal life, for example, and then I know that they're a closed, very introverted person, for me that's a victory because they're opening up to you. So I find little victories everywhere. So that's why I can always keep myself going, because I don't get too strung up, because I can always find these little victories, and that kind of justifies what I'm doing or anything else. So yeah, me personally, I don't really have that experience. I'm more of maybe it's the way I look at life more than anything else. I always try to find these little wins to keep me going, which is probably what I needed to do when I did my runs, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's
But yeah.
literally how we started. So
Yeah.
I went and did a talk in a school,
Yeah.
and a little kid came up after and said that his dad was in prison and he took drugs and he thought he was going to die in prison, but he's going to tell him about my story, and then hopefully he'll stop taking drugs and he'll come home and never go back to prison again. And I was just like, wow. And then it was then where I first thought, this is what I want to do. This feels better than working a month and getting paid. And I mean, obviously, it's nice to get paid, but at first it was just
You
like,
don't get paid. No, we don't do that.
you just put all your money back into it.
Yeah.
And it was just that conversation, and you get like I'm glad, because I struggle with compliments, I struggle with praise. I had a couple of poets on last week and we spoke about this, and if I perform, when I come off stage, if someone comes up to talk to me to say, oh, that was really good or anything, I just, oh, thanks, I appreciate that. That's my stock sentence. That's the sort of autopilot response. Thanks, I appreciate that. And then I'll change the subject to something I feel more comfortable talking about. And I hate it. So in a way, it's good for me to not get that praise, because it makes me feel really uncomfortable. Whereas I'm the same in that if somebody asked me to go back and deliver another session, in Halifax, the youth offending team, we've done so much work with them, and they constantly, can we do this? And some certain police officers, can we do this? And to me, that means we're doing something right. And that's all I need. It's just about that sort of, if people are, and again, it's because we don't work one-to-one with young people, so we don't get the opportunity to see that, but we do get feedback saying they're still talking about you however many months after. But for me, the thing that lets me know we're doing right is when professionals want us to come back, because we're making a difference to the people that they work with. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But you're right, you have to believe in what you're doing.
Yeah.
And you do need to learn to take the small victories
Mm.
and to look at the bigger picture. I think for me, I was always taught that you end up somewhere on purpose, and although I like that a lot, do you know what I mean? And it's been a real driver for me, I guess, in my own life. That holds challenges sometimes when you're in an area of high deprivation. When people don't generally, the survival mentality.
Yeah.
So most people that I know on the local estates where I'm based don't have a diary. You know, so there's no planning, like there's no ending up somewhere on purpose. There's day-to-day survival, and it is those basics of beginning to see changes, like you say, you know, Lauren, in terms of that turning up on time. You know, actually it becoming a thing that is of value, and beginning to build those initial relationships and stuff. They are massive wins. And although they're not necessarily always understood in a bigger picture on a funding bid, because they're considered to be norms by most people who will read the funding bids and decide who gets money or not. And like that's a challenge, because you've got the conflict of two different worlds. But you have to learn to do what you do because you believe it's the right thing to do. Has to be your driver, otherwise you're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah. I think you've hit the nail on the head there, though, with trying to translate it into a funding bid, and that two different worlds colliding. You know, the people that are reading the bids, many of them will have never have stepped foot onto some of the estates where we work ever, you know, and it's like, how do you then translate that into how the small victories are actually huge victories in the grand scheme of things?
I think one of the things I'd like to do, because the funding pots we apply for are all very similar. Not us, I mean, when I apply for funding. So we've got the police or the Arts Council, because we do the spoken word side to stuff, we're quite lucky. We've got quite a broad scale of opportunity when it comes to funding. And with the Arts Council, once they fund something and you deliver and then report back, that's sort of puts you above anyone who's never had funding. So you've got more of an opportunity to get it again. So you build this relationship. But when we was in Bradford last year, I won't mention him, but the funder actually came and he walked around, he met some of the kids, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that would be a brilliant thing for. So if we're constantly going, so I've actually had people from the VRU come and sit in some of our sessions. So I know that as long as them particular people are working for the VRU, then we'll always have somebody in-house on board after seeing us deliver.
Advocating for you.
Yeah. And I think that's really important, because if you could get someone to come to your sessions, or if we could get some of your kids to come here and talk about the sessions or something. In fact, if that's something you wanted to do, we can bring them here and we can talk to them about how the sessions sort of help them, and then even if it's just on social media where you refer to it in your funding bids, because how else are you going to get people to see what you are doing, like you say, unless you film every session?
So for me, like I said, you hit the nail on the head. I always knew the value of having something visual to show you what we're doing. So we're lucky. My brother's a filmmaker. V. Simon Lewis, follow him on Instagram. My brother's a filmmaker, and he applied for some funding from the BFI to do a film around the basketball project, and he got it. So we've actually got a film, 20-minute documentary coming out around the stuff that we're doing in the community. So we're in a very privileged position. It just happened that I have a brother who's a filmmaker, and I have know the value of having film. So I imagine as a result of that film, we'll probably get a lot more funding, because people can see something and see, okay, so he does that and he does that, okay, and this is what this person feels about it. And I can't underestimate the value of having some visual footage of what you do. I wish it was part of the criteria for a funding bid, to be honest with you, really.
Upload video here.
Yeah. I really do. Like I know some funding bids ask you for like social media and things like that, but I wish they can ask you for like a small 5-minute clip, whether it's a young person telling you about their experience, or a video of your session, your basketball session, or your arts and crafts session. You know, I think, especially in the funding, when it comes to funding, I think they underestimate that too much. It's very much around the stats. how many people are you targeting and everything like that. And I think it kind of gets missed sometimes.
Yeah, because they're the things they can put into some sort of
Report.
numerical system
Yeah,
and
yeah,
say,
yeah.
okay, so over this many weeks they're working with this many people, whereas this one's working with this, and that's how it works. It doesn't matter about the quality of work; it's how many more people are going to get.
Yeah. The reason
Benefit from this.
I don't like that. So, for example, if I'm working with 5 people, 5 young people, and those 5 young people are notorious on that estate,
Yeah,
and this person's working with 100 people, and none of them are involved in any sort of crime. Yes, they may have crime around them, but they're not directly involved in crime. Who has the bigger impact?
yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's one of the
Yeah.
questions you was asked: how many people will you reach?
Yeah.
with this
Yeah.
funding?
Yeah. So
And, yeah, it's true. And the thing is, with the kind of kids that we work with, is if you work with big numbers, it's behaviour management.
Yeah.
It's not depth that you need to go to be able
Yeah.
to have a long-term impact. Exactly the way you say, Ryan.
yeah. So I think sometimes it's too much of a numbers game. Yes, there's a place for it. You do need it, but I think they sometimes need to look more towards the quality rather than the quantity.
I think the other problem is as well. Do you have a website?
Yeah.
Do you have a website?
Nope.
Do you have a website?
It's in the process at the moment. Yeah.
So I've had a web domain for years, and I've finally got a website.
Yeah.
But all the work we do goes on social media, not on the website.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
the
same, yeah.
website is a basic blueprint of who we are, what we do. And when funders say, "Do you have a website?" Like, yeah, but and then it's the whole. I don't have my own and work Instagram, so I don't want to put my Instagram because it'll have stuff that I do outside
Your
of
bikes.
my motorbikes, and and it's sort of, it's good that they're asking to see examples of work that you might do through a website, but I think like I say, social media is where the updates happen. The website is just for somewhere to refer to, and that's the other sort of kick in the teeth for me. Like I feel like I don't, we've already spoke about how time consuming all the things that you don't want to do are, because that takes away from the time you can deliver. And then if you're having to constantly update, your website on a, I don't know, fortnightly, monthly basis, it's just more time that you're not doing the stuff you want to do.
Yeah, because I think, firstly, if you're doing it yourself, it's probably going to look quite amateur because none of us are professional web designers, right?
No, we've just got a team that have come in to do it.
Yeah, and them teams are not cheap either. So then it's like, how do you present yourself externally in this kind of professional way where funders find you appealing on a shoestring budget? Because when can you apply for funding and say, oh yeah, there's 5, 6, 7, 8, even 10 grand just to do all our online presence and all our branding and social media and website? No funders, or very few, are going to chuck thousands of pounds at you to be able to do that stuff. So
Core funding is hard to find.
yeah,
You can fund sessional workers, you can fund that kind of stuff, but your core everyday running costs, it's hard. That's hard to find.
Yeah, that's the. I pay for our web domain. I pay for the tablet that we use for work with all our finances on. There's so much stuff that I pay for on a monthly basis, like subscriptions to Zoom, little things like that, where it's 15 quid a month. There's loads of little things where it all adds up, and it's all just coming out where I can't claim that stuff back because what funding bid allows you to. It's stuff that you need.
yeah.
And that's frustrating. But I was quite lucky. I was introduced to a guy called Simon Clark from, I think his website's called The Moody Child, and he did all of our webpage. So he'd just started out, and I think he chose a handful of charities to do them for free. So we've got this amazing website, and we didn't have to pay for it, which really sort of helped us out because, again, like you say, the cost of that can be ridiculous. But then there's people, if you don't have funding for it, there's students who need to do real life websites as part of their coursework. And it's something I never thought about, sort of leaning on universities, and because they've got people who are in training to do stuff that need real life situations to be able to deliver it. I think even things like fund writing bids. No, is that how you say it? I've said it twice now and it's not sounding
Fund
right.
writing.
Writing.
Yeah.
Bid
Bid
writing.
writing.
I'm just putting fund writing and writing bids together. I knew it didn't sound right. Twice I've said it now. I was like, fund writing bids, that does not sound right at all. And again, I've got an external person who I pay to do that sort of stuff for me because I won 2 funding bids when we first started, 2 over £20,000 funding bids that I'd wrote myself. But I had a relationship with both organisations. One was the Police and Crime Commission, and we had a lot of back and forth emails, adjusting, and we were successful. But we'd been coached into what to do for that, so we sort of knew that was going to happen. And then the other one was with a company called Metro, doing youth work in bus stations, and that's a company who I worked for multiple years, who I've got a good relationship with some of the management there. So when I presented my idea, it was the idea that made them say yes. But when do you get an opportunity to pitch? When do you get? I think that could be a good way for funders to decide. Other than you'll have people who suffer with anxiety who could have a brilliant idea, but no ability to. It's us on paper. They might not have the ability to sort of present that. I don't know what the answer is.
No.
But that's anyone who I speak to that runs an organisation. Funding is the thing that comes up, and the sort of either the lack of funding or the lack of opportunity or the process, which is like if you want either a larger amount, the amount of work that has to go in it, which is understandable. People are giving you money, so you have to be expected to put some effort in to get it.
Yeah, be accountable for it. Yeah, locally.
Yeah.
But I think you're right in that sense. But I think the challenge of that is also nobody knows your own project better than you do.
Yeah.
And when you are limited in time, sometimes it can be quicker to do it yourself than to try and explain to somebody else. And sometimes it can be harder for other people to sell your project. Do you know what I mean? Because actually they're not in it, in the same way that you are. And I think certainly one of the things that I guess I have questions over, and maybe you guys do too, like longer term, is so you would hope in time that if you're doing a really good job, you kind of do yourself out of a job. Because you're training up other people. The hope is we train up other people, and you have young leaders come through and all that kind of stuff. And that, we're talking long term, aren't we, in terms of that kind of development, and what does that really look like? I mean, I know some great people who are based locally. I don't know a lot of people that can really work high end estate. There are some fantastic people around the country that can do it. I have no doubt. But it can be challenging in that sense, and it comes at a cost. And I think that then it's not necessarily an easy thing to sell. It's got to be a natural passion or come out of your own experience, like your stuff has, and all of our stuff has, I suppose, in different ways. And I think for me, I have huge questions in terms of where do we go longer term as a city. Do you know what I mean? Let alone as a country, with areas of high deprivation, they are increasing. What will that look like in 5 years' time? What will it look like in 10 years' time? We have knife crime increasing at the moment. We know, in terms of different capacities, what does it look like in 10 years' time? And what does that look like if we don't have people that are being trained up to be really good high-end estate youth workers? And what does that look like? Because, I did my Masters in Youth and Community Development at Leeds, but I've learned how to do what I do on the estate. And it's through the people who have more experience than me that I learned from. And what does that look like? And how do we build up a generation of people that have resilience and passion in this kind of area, who are committed, longer term, to be able to create opportunities for change.
Yeah.
And where do we see that ripple effect? And that, is a huge question I often have in the back of my mind, is how do you train up people well to do this? Yeah.
I think that's off the back of that. Another challenge I find is team, building a team, and getting the right people in your team. Because it's great to work in partnership with other organisations, but you need a core team. And I think I found in experience, you get great people coming in, but they just... I often say you've either got it or you haven't, and I think there's just something in that passion for people that you've either got it or you haven't, and you can't train it. But actually finding, they're like gold dust. We are like gold dust, like actually finding people that I think, especially in as current Instagrammable let's all be the next kind of social media influencer kind of era that we're all living in, who aspires to be a community youth worker working in some of the most challenging and deprived areas of the country? Like, who actually desires that? Because I know I didn't desire that as a school leaver, but it was from the life experience that I had that brought this passion out of me and led me to that place. So
Also, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Yeah, for me, I think the people are out there. So I think I'm not sure if I spoke about it on camera. One of the guys I work with, he was a basketball coach in the Chabatown area for about 30 years. Like, he just got on with his job, he just got on with it. Never applied for funding, never had any sort of recognition from anyone. So there are loads of people like that. But it's about getting out there and finding them. There are people that want to do youth work and want to help young people, but they don't know how to do it. And that's what I found. And that's why I've been able to kind of build a team quite quickly in such a short space of time, because I realized there are people out there that want to make a change. There are people that want to help young people.
Yeah.
But where do you go if you want to?
Is that because of basketball though? So if you were doing classroom stuff, do you think it would have been as easy to get people on board who would come and literally just work with young people on the problems they're having? Because when you introduce a sport, like if you think about local football teams, they're all just run by someone's dad, and then a couple of the other dads or mums, or it's usually someone connected to a player that then coaches the team.
None of the coaches that I have are related to any of the kids that I know. So none of the volunteers are related. I've only just started getting parents involved. Like for the last year, it's just been for context, one of the coaches had just finished uni. Another one was working a lot of them were working with me. So a lot of the people that work with me now worked with me when I used to work at the college. So I was like the link to the community. So here's people that are working in a college setting, so they're working in a formal educational setting, but they still wanted to be able to help outside of the formal education setting, but they didn't know who to go to. And here's me, this guy that's working in the community, and you'd be surprised in the settings, so like educational establishments, even though they work with kids, not a lot of them do stuff in the community. Even though they may want to, but it's just about finding a link. Maybe they don't have the confidence to approach your organization, or they just don't know how to. So what I've tried to do, especially in this last year, is reach out to people, just ask the question. Like, I don't have any shame. I don't mind being told no. I ask people. If you ask anyone that I speak to, I bug people. If I see a hint of caring in them, I will say, listen, you need to come work with me. And that's how I get volunteers. If they've said to me, oh, do you know what? If I'm in a conversation with someone, he said, it would be really good if I could do something to help more kids. Fantastic, brilliant. You need to come speak to me. And what I found as a result of that, because I approach everyone, not everyone, but I approach people that I think can fit, I get more volunteers. And it's people that probably wouldn't have volunteered otherwise. But rather than waiting for people to come in and find you, I go and find them. And it's not through an application form or anything like that. I go and find them. I go to colleges, so I look for people that are working in colleges or school settings already, because those are the people that are caring as such. So yeah, that's my experience of it. Really.
Our team is also very organically built. It's the people that you meet along the way, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
That you kind of draw into you. And I think, but for me, it's also thinking about that bigger picture. So if I take myself out of the equation, what does it look like? Do you know what I mean? And what does it look like for our city? In a bigger picture scale, I guess, in terms of how do we better equip people?
You need to start equipping people in areas that you're working with. So if you work in Beeston, how do you get some of the people that work in Beeston, live in Beeston, into your project? So I'm a massive fan of that. Rather than trying to find people from elsewhere, go into your community and upskill them.
I agree. Totally agree.
Me too.
That's what I feel needs to happen. You need to try and find people that have the experience through living, but they may not have the academic qualifications, or they may not have the ability to go into an interview and sell themselves as well as they could. So put the time and effort into them, And I think you'll get better run organisations if you did it that way.
I totally agree, and I think for me, it's thinking through those kind of things in terms of bigger picture thinking. I guess in terms of like, I guess we all work with estate peeps in different capacities who won't necessarily have the level of education that you'd need to work in a school.
Yeah.
For example, and if you're crossing over and doing mentoring stuff in different capacities, how do you look at bridging those gaps? Because whether we like it or not, there are those kind of hierarchical educational divides. And so how do we play a part longer term in kind of bridging the gap between life experience and academic success, I guess, and how do we draw both of the riches of both of those worlds together to enable people right across the board? And
Yeah, I think that long-term legacy is something that drives me forward, actually, in thinking, how can what I'm doing now be set up in a way to carry on without me? You know, because even though I love what I do, I think this year's shown all of us, you know, you don't know what's around the corner and what's going to happen. And when you're the one, I guess we're all here as founders, so we've all been them kind of visionaries that are pioneering stuff, that are carrying the weight of the whole organisation. And sometimes I think I really try and catch myself in thinking, can I change the way that I'm doing this now so that it better fits beyond me, past me, and a longer legacy for the community, for the local people? Because again, we can't do it all.
The problem I have with that is I only work with people who've been through something. So you've got people out of prison, you've got people who are drug addicts or mental health. So unless you've been through something that you're willing to talk about or run a project on, then I'm not going to allow you to talk to kids about something you're educated in, because then you're like other organisations. So you imagine you get somebody who's not very confident, and I do a presentation and then they do 10 minutes at the end, and then next time they do 10 minutes at the end, and then a few times later they'll do 20 minutes, or they might host the presentation and introduce me, and it's about building that confidence. So you've got somebody who had no confidence because of their past experiences. You start to build their confidence, they become employable, they get a job in services, which is brilliant, and it's happened to every volunteer I've had. Not saying that all of them were unemployable to start with, but you gain a level of sort of confidence, experience, and when you start doing something where people are feeding back to you that you're making a difference, it gives you this sort of glow. Like I've always said, volunteering, people say, oh, it's such a selfless act. I was like, mate, when you get that feeling where you've helped somebody, you know, that's enough to make you want to do it again. So there's no selfless about it. But and it's brilliant, but the volunteers then move on to work in proper jobs, paid jobs. And then you get new volunteers, and then they come through, and it's the same process. So it's brilliant that we're able to help people into employment, but there's no sort of long-term when it comes to funding again. If I could employ any of those volunteers on a long-term basis, I know that they would leave whatever job they had to come and work and do the work that we do. But it's like with JoJo's training people up so that as they get older, they get responsibility over the younger ones. And then that's where some of the sort of older ones that are with you now have started off as the younger ones that were being taught from a young age. Have you got anything in place, have either of you? Because I know the girl that you're talking about. Do you think, because there was, when it came to like baking and stuff, there was like motherly instincts there, weren't there? Do you think there's an opportunity for some of your younger people to sort of step up and take some responsibility in future?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've tried to do, especially with some of the group that we worked with last year, is transition them across into, because some of the work we're doing in the summer is around that moving up from year 6 into year 7. So for the young people that went through that transition last year, how do we then bring them in this year as mentors, peer mentors, as like, I was where you was last year. So we're seeing that live out. And I think beyond that, I would love some of the young people that we're working with to be eventually staff members, potentially. I mean, I love what you said, Joe, about that one of your first young people is now a trustee, because that is like, that's the ultimate. If we're able to work with young people that then can transition through into what we're already doing or doing something different, that's the ultimate for me. So I'm always thinking about that. And we did sports leaders with quite a few of them last year to develop their leadership skills through sport that way. I find quite a lot of them struggle with the term leader. I think that's just from where they're at confidence-wise. The pressure that comes with being a leader means that then they go into fight or flight and just run. So I guess it's finding that sweet spot, that right time to kind of give someone that level of promotion. But I'm always hoping for that and looking towards opportunities where that can happen, for sure.
What about you? Is the
Yeah.
scope?
Yeah, 100%. Like, most of what I'm doing is around getting young people involved in, some sort of leadership. So, for example, we painted the courts at Mandela Centre in Chapeltown.
Is it blue?
It's blue, yeah.
Seen the pictures.
Have you seen it? Yeah. My pictures are getting around, actually. Yeah. So yeah, but all that was done by young people that come to my sessions. We've only been running for a year, so I can't really tell you that I've had this person that was here and now they're there. But we do work with Street Games quite a lot. So Street Games do like young leaders programs, which a couple of the few young people that on our program go on to that. We have a link with Leeds City College. So there's young people that are in education that came through our basketball program that were doing basketball. Now they're doing coaching. So in the long term, touch wood, I want all our coaches to have been young people at some point in our program. That would be fantastic for me.
Yeah.
If I can get as many young people qualified as coaches, even if they don't want to do it as a full-time job or anything like that, it's something they could do on the side. Whether they're a builder during the day and they do coaching in the evening, that's fine by me. Because at the end of the day, that works better for me because you're in an organisation that could potentially be our sponsor. So yeah, our whole model is around getting young people to be the leaders and lead the sessions. So we're molding it at the moment to try and do that. At the moment, there's a few young people that I hope will eventually, when they get older, will be the leaders and running the organisation. But
So what happens then? So this is for everybody. Because again, the work I do is so varied. So we do. I've got virtual reality projects. I've got live theatre. I've got the podcasts. We've got school sessions. We've got spoken word workshops. I'm doing a poetry tour, and it's all through life experience. If you have young people that come up and start coaching, do you then step back and think, what's the next?
yeah.
What do I make now? Or do you sort of always overlook? Because I have real separation issues. Like I can't not be at stuff that life experience are doing because I want to make sure that it's going well, and if there's a question, I want to make sure it's answered properly. Or
So long term, I want to kick back and just be on the phone if you need me.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. I don't want to do this forever. I really don't. Yeah. So I think it's imperative in order for me to live out that dream, I have to train people up to not just my ability but above. So yeah, I as bad as it may sound bad. I don't know, but I don't want to do this forever. But I want to make sure that I've left some sort of a legacy. So by the time it's time for me to kick my feet up and relax, I know that it's in safe hands. So I know from now, at the start of my journey, I need to upskill as many people as possible to be on my level or above. Because I started everything based on my experience. So the reason I started this organisation was based on my experience as a teenager, the things I got involved in, the barriers that I had. And I know that most of the young people I work with have similar barriers, if not worse barriers than I did. So if I can get a spark, light a spark in one of them, there's no reason why they can't do better than me. And even if they don't want to take the LDM name and they want to create their own organisation, that's fine. You know, just credit me somewhere. But but yeah, if I spark the next, I may not. I can't remember who said the quote. If I might not make the change, but I might spark the idea in someone that is going to make a change. You know what I mean? So I live by that philosophy. So yeah, I have no problem thinking I want to step back. That's
Are you
what
thinking same as me, Loran? How can he afford to retire?
Right.
I'm doing
When is that ever
definitely
possible?
doing something wrong. He's talking about upskilling someone to retire. Like what?
Yeah, it's
You make a pension and a living out of it.
for me, like I said, this is my life at the moment. I mean, but it's not gonna be like my life forever. I don't feel like. I know anything I do, I'm gonna be helping people. Yes, I started this organisation, but if in 10, 15 years someone else can lead it, that is fine by me.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm happy to go do other things. I know I'm always going to help people. It may not always be in basketball, it may not always be in mentoring, but I always help people in some capacity. So if I can have different projects running, then it's something that I've helped build, and I can look at myself in the mirror.
I've just had an idea.
What's that?
You have young people that get trained up and skilled into let's do more, and then the older people move
Let's
up
do
to
less.
let's do less.
Yes, let's do this.
That's like the retirement
You're not the
phase.
first person to say that. So yeah, that is the long-term vision for me to do less, because I'm doing a lot at the moment. So yeah, I think I like that. I might have to take that model. You know?
as long as you credit
I will
me
credit
somewhere.
you. Don't worry about that. I will credit you.
I think there's a good philosophy there in what you're saying, though, in the sense of because we're building something that's ours, it can be so easy to be really precious because it's our baby.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of separation issue that you're talking about. But actually, I think good leadership is that you leading people in a way that means there comes a point where you don't need to hold their hand anymore. And I'm not there yet, you know, and who knows if I'll ever get there. I hope I will. But I know, again, the years taught me that I can't be everywhere all the time. I don't know what's going to happen. You know, the beginning of the year, I had a serious accident that meant I was laid up, not even being able to walk for 3 months. I can't do I did do youth work on crutches, actually, but really difficult to do. So I think it came to a reality for me that I can't do everything all the time forever. And whether it's that I want to go kick back or whether it's that I want to do something that's slightly different, there needs to be a way for the legacy to live on somewhere, like I mentioned earlier. So yeah, I guess I'm not there yet, but I'm definitely trying to look at ways in which, how can I lead others in an example that means that I can step away trusting and knowing that they're going to do the job really well, not because it's anything to do with me, but because they care about what they're doing and want to do it well.
Yeah, I think there's, like, I say that I used to have will they do this the way that I would? And I don't think that's how it should be. I think it should be the way that they do it.
Yeah.
And I just need to appreciate that. Even like editing videos, so I won't let anyone edit the podcast because I think, well, what if I'd say, well, I want to change that camera there, or do you know what I mean? And it's just petty little things that allows me to keep control. But just before lockdown, we were so busy and we had multiple projects running. So I've got a brilliant friend in Halifax who works in recovery, and he's got a crazy story, and the place where he works houses other people in recovery. So when it came to all the Halifax youth offending sessions that I mentioned earlier, or any of the school sessions in Leeds, I put him and St Giles's Trust together. So I invited St Giles's Trust to bring some of their volunteers in and get involved in some of the work we do. And them two combinations worked really well. So I was able to take a step back and deal with the other projects. So we were doing like live theatre, and when it's something new, I 100% want to be there because this is creation. This isn't delivery. And it made me realise that I've restricted what we do because I've wanted to be at everything. So if I've got something in my calendar and someone says, "Can you do this on this day?" I'll look and say, "Okay, I'm busy." Whereas the
But your
reality
organisation ain't just you.
this is it. The reality is that somebody else could have delivered that.
Yeah.
And I had a volunteer, and the idea was that she was going to take over the whole of the schoolwork. So she would take on the booking, so she'd be the first point of contact. So we'd literally split the company in half. And then it didn't work out with her. There was some problems that happened in her personal life, and it took a lot for me to trust somebody to take on, and then it knocked me because it was her choices that caused the problems in her personal life. And I'd got to a point where I've found this one person that I thought, this is like another me, where I'm quite happy to not even have to question the way that the work's delivered. And like I say, that really knocked me back, because then it was like all the things I worried about in my head before I found her were then confirmed. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a scary thing.
Yeah, it is. And I always offer to people that I meet, come and do some work with us, and then hopefully on one of the sessions you'll think, this is it, this is what I want to do. And if it's not something we deliver, or if it is something we deliver, get used to doing it for a certain amount of time, and then I will help you start your own company. I'll introduce you to the people that helped me start. I'll help you with the paperwork. I'll do whatever I can to give you that opportunity to then go on and create your own thing. But was it you that said then you're creating sort of competition?
Yeah.
There's already only like little funding pots, and then you're like, are they really going to go for that funding pot? So then it's like, let's do a joint bid where we work together. But it's about sort of bringing people through, and because I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if I didn't have the amount of help I had. Someone literally wrote the entire paperwork to register for Companies House, did all that for me, sent it off, came back, there was a couple of things, corrected them for me, sent it off again. I would never, the wad of paper that got sent to Companies House, I would not have known how to do that. I would not have had a clue, and it would have always just been them people who aren't registered coming and doing their thing, whereas obviously registering allowed us to then get particular pots of funding where you have to have a company registration number and stuff. And I think that's why, like, I get told off all the time, because as long as I've got a project that's paying my bills, we do everything else for free. And there's so many people.
Yes, I think I've told you off a few times, haven't I?
I think a lot, 66% of this room have told me off about that before. And then the two girls in Huddersfield, one of them was very much like I am. I'm paying my bills, that's all I'm bothered about. If there's people who can benefit from this that can't afford it, let's do that. And then when she met the other girl who was very business, then it's made that sort of blossom. So they've got that sort of nice balance.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm just like, I've got money for my bills, and now I'm just happy to, we'll do that. Yeah, it's all right. Or we'll deliver this, or we'll do that. And
You offer to pay and you say, no, I don't want paying. It's like, take the money, please, But I think one of the things that, like, I'm sure it's a quote by someone that's, like, way more intelligent than me, but, like, can't remember who. But about, like, surrounding yourself with people that are better than you at certain stuff. And I think there comes a point where, and it's a point I've kind of got to over the last few years and trying to be more proactive in, that I want the people underneath me that I can train up, but actually I want people around me that are further on their journey, that are more experienced, that have got skills that I don't have, so then actually I can pass some of the load to them. Bid writing, perfect example. I'm not the best bid writer, so let me find someone who is, to take that load off of me. So then it's literally time. You can't put a price on time, especially when you're running a whole organisation. So I think there's something valuable in being strategic about having people further along than we are. So then we can kind of tap into their expertise and level up to them as well, and kind of leverage some of our time that way too.
Yeah, I spoke to an American woman, and she's starting recovery coaching. So her and her daughter were on, and they're the first two people outside of America that have ever been trained to be able to deliver this particular thing. And she was telling me about the number 7. So if you think about anything in your life, so let's say knowledge. If you think of your 7 closest friends, you'll always be the third. So you'll always be in the middle of your friendship group on everything. So the other people differ on where they're at and stuff. And I was just like, no, I'm number 1 for everything. The way my head works is...
Yeah, I'm the best at everything.
I'm an addict. Of course I'm going to be the best at everything. But it was interesting to think, and I've really sort of tried to sit and sort of process certain situations and the people in my life and where would I put myself. And it's that same, you do want just as many people who know more about particular things as people who are looking up to you for that knowledge. Because then you have a good balance where you're able to bring people through, but also take guidance from somebody. And like I say, if it weren't for those people in my life, I'd still probably be working 3 jobs. That's where I'd be at, definitely.
I also, I think there's a big difference between, stewardship and ownership. And I think, I think one of the things that I've learned and I'm learning, do you know what I mean, is that we don't really get to own anything. We get to steward it. And we have a nice idea of being in control of things, but we're not really. And, it can give us a sense of security, I guess, in some respects, but I'm not sure how secure that really is. And so I think it's a lot to do with me in terms of my learning, in terms of understanding my own drivers and my own personality, and also how I can use that. And sometimes I've used that, I think, well. Sometimes I've done stuff and thought, actually, maybe through me having to, in myself, or me it being quicker for me to do it myself. Maybe in that process, certainly working with young people, I think there's been points where I probably disempowered some young people because I've done it, because it was quicker for me to do it. And actually through that learning of going, actually, yeah, Joe, it might have taken longer, but actually the long-term benefit for them would have been in me allowing that process. And I think in giving people permission to fail, and to learn through that, and the power of that. And actually I think often you can feel a big weight in terms of running staff and all that kind of, and it is great to have people that we learn from. I think it's why we need a team. I mean, I couldn't do what I do without my team at all. We are a team. And so it's, otherwise it doesn't work. And so it's very much looking at those kind of things. And I know that if other people run stuff sometimes, would they necessarily run it like I would? No. But sometimes they run stuff better than I would, and sometimes they run stuff differently than I would. And, and at points, do I think there'll be things that we can all improve on? Yeah, absolutely. But it's only in giving people permission to learn themselves, I guess, do we really ever get to grow in the first place. And so I do think there's a lot to do with learning that we don't really get to own anything in the first place. And actually, for me, with Re-establish, I mean, there's, to an extent, you only have a certain shelf life as a youth worker, because ideally you want a tangible age of person to be able to look up to. And don't get me wrong, I think there's so much richness in intergenerational work right across the board. So there is always a place, do you know what I mean, to have an impact and to learn in different ways and to teach in different ways. However, from a youth work point of view, I know now, from a youth work point of view, I'm probably just about starting to work with the last generation of young people that I will see through as a youth worker. Because the next generation are going to need people that are 10 years, 20 years, 30 years younger than I am. And that's healthy. And if I'm holding on to this thing that I have to control and I have to be a part of and I have to own, actually it loses its power. It loses the impact. Because actually the impact comes in the everyday. The impact comes in, if I shut everything that we do down tomorrow, I know that we've had an impact. I love that. And it's about that, and it's going, okay, we've actually not failed. We've had a huge impact. Has it ended in the way that I hoped? Probably not. Do you know what I mean? But actually I think it's very much looking at that, and it's so much stuff is linked into our hopes and expectations, isn't it? But I think a lot of that is very much linked into who we are as individuals, and the more I guess we dare to understand ourselves, the more freely I guess we hold stuff. But I think for us, like a lot of the stuff we do with the kids is very much about innate value. Do you know what I mean? And it's very much to do with emotional literacy or illiteracy. And I think as a society collectively, like, actually we spend so much time either worrying about what other people think, or can we survive on this, or what about that, but we lose so much in that. And actually it's giving people permission to fail, it's giving people permission not to get things right. I don't get everything right all the time, but I have learned actually at points I've probably been a little bit self-righteous without even realising.
Yeah.
Like, I know for me, like when I was, this may sound a bit silly, but I guess for me, when I was 18, I went over to Africa for 9 months. I learned so much over there, do you know what I mean, from the people that I met, beautiful people that I met, and I also learned a huge amount about myself. And I also learned that I thought as a white middle class kid, and I had no idea, because my norm had been as a white middle class kid. And it wasn't until I'd taken myself out, had the opportunity to go into an entirely different environment than was my norm, that I learned actually, oh my goodness, Joe, you have got so much to learn about the richness of life and all those different kind of things. So I think it's only when we begin to shift worldviews and shift norms and all that kind of stuff that we really get to find out about the depths of who we are, I guess.
Yeah.
And then we have to be free with it, because it's never as in the first place anyway.
Yeah, that's so valuable. And I think that learning about who we are, I think a few years ago, we all get a bit prickly when we get criticism, right? Just because that's natural. I think there's an element of that being natural human instinct. But I started to realise that actually that prickle was my detriment, as you're saying there, because there was people that was giving me real good sound advice or recognising my weaknesses for how things could be a little bit better, not to criticise me maliciously, but to help me grow. But straight away I would go, prickle, guard up, no thanks, don't want to know, you know? Which then was a detriment to me, what I was doing, a detriment to our relationship, because now that person feels that they can't give me that level of feedback again. So we either part ways or it just becomes a bit of a sanitised relationship, which is never valuable. But I think, yeah, me recognising that prickle in me has allowed me to grow past that. And when I feel that prickle now, I just kind of smile, listen, and I'm able to go away, reflect, and actually think, wow, that person wasn't, because it's easy to take things personal as well, isn't it? When you're building something that is your pride and joy, and you eat, breathe, sleep, dream this organisation and this work that we do, when someone then comes into this space and says something that isn't stroking our egos, so to speak, it can feel so personal. And I would never have said at the time that I was personally offended or that I got prickly. I would get prickly by you saying I was prickly, you know? Never even realised until I've learned that about myself, sat back and thought, oh. And that growth has come from being able to just know that in me, to then know how to navigate it once it comes out.
I've thought a lot about what you said along the lines of, at what age do you stop? So I don't want to keep talking to young people about my story because I'm a million years older than them. And at my age, I'm not going to really relate to what they're going through. Even you look at technology and stuff like that, it's all stuff that was different from when we were young. So it's hard for us to understand what it's like to be a young person today. But I don't know if I would ever, if I've always got the opportunity to run life experience, then I think like I've spoke about before, what I'd like my role to be is to meet whoever it is from that particular police force or the school or the counsellor, whoever it is that's saying we've got an issue with this, and then to create a project and then find people to run it I don't know if that's what you were saying about when you want to step back, but
Yeah.
I always want to be involved in the sense that I want to be able to create projects for other people to run and then go meet the next person and find out what issues they're having and how can we look at how we can fix this. But then I think even that has a lifespan, because there's going to be all sorts of new young people coming through with ideas.
Innovative ideas.
Yeah, that us dinosaurs won't think about.
Yeah. I mean, do you know how to use TikTok?
I've got TikTok, yeah.
Have you?
Yeah.
Yeah, you go, guy.
I've not done any videos on it. It was more so when lockdown happened, we were fortunate enough to have just, was that lockdown funding? So I bought 10 iPads basically, and spoke to Joe and was like, we could sort of set different online challenges. So we got TikTok to look at some of the dances where the people learn these scripted dances, and then so we was going to hand tablets out to the families and then give them an opportunity to get involved in some stuff. And then we ended up doing a South Leeds lockdown project. So 250 families, and just creating a 2-week, I think it was going to be like a month, so 4 weeks worth of activities. And then it was like, well, if we could do 250, maybe we could do 700. If we can do 4 weeks, maybe we could do 8. Oh no, what was it? It was 8, wasn't it? Yeah. So we did 4 packs, all with 14 days worth of activities. Yeah. And even there, like the creation side, what did we like doing? Cornflake buns. Yeah, we loved doing them when we were young. That's quite easy to do. We'll do cornflake buns. Pizzas, make your own pizzas. Brilliant idea. And then the ideas get wrote down, and then we have a different meeting where we're like, right, let's plan how this is going to work. So now we need 700 portions of cornflakes. So we bought big boxes of cornflakes, and then we got scales, and we weighed out 700 portions of cornflakes. Pizzas, brilliant. How do we make pizza? We need pizza sauce, we need cheese, and then when you think of 700 of anything, it's a lot. But we wouldn't have, there were so many people who did either full days all week, 6 days a week, or people who came for an hour, and each one of them added a little bit to this project that made it manageable. It was tough, and there was times where we was like, it's always just us. Why is it just us? Where's everybody else? But it was brilliant, and I loved it. And this is the thing, that was 4 or 5 people, all over 30. Ooh, actually, I don't think Emily was over 30, is she? No, so, okay, so we're all over 25. Sorry, Emily. But, a couple worked in schools, so they were used to creating projects for young people, but we managed to think up 8 weeks of daily activities for young people. So when things like that happen, it makes me think, well, that was definitely a success. We've had some brilliant feedback from people who didn't even know they were giving us feedback. They were talking about this amazing bag that got delivered with all these different tasks. It was like, that's us.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we did that. So it was amazing to get that, because that wasn't false. That wasn't, oh yeah, I bet they're really good. It was somebody genuinely talking about something we did, not knowing that we were the creators of it. And it just makes me think that maybe there isn't an age where your ideas become extinct.
Depends how much you grow, doesn't it, really, and how much you keep your foot on the gas. I've got a family member who was at the top of his game in design 20 years ago. Now doesn't have a job because design has moved way past his capabilities of pencil, paper. Everything digital now. Whereas the other people in his field of his age that kept their foot on the gas, that developed with the times and are now still working in that design space. And I guess it's the same for us as youth workers. There is a shelf life from that sense of visually. Do we look the way that young people want or expect us to look for us to be that role model? But actually, are we doing what we can to keep up to date as well?
That's why
and
I
I
wear
think
a hat.
that's helped. So it hides your receding hairline.
No.
Or your grey
So I'm
hair.
more relatable to young people. You know that's getting cut out, don't you?
We've got to bring some comedy, right?
Well, like I said, for me, I can emphasize exactly what all of you have said. When I first started working with young people, I was a young person myself, so that was where the relatability came. So I started doing youth work when I was 17. I used to like coach in the local park, and I was coaching with an older coach. So he used me as a way to say, oh, you build that rapport with them because we like the same music. We live in the similar area. We have similar slang, and that's what I used to. That used to be my go-to when it came to youth work. I can go into a session. I know exactly the same slang as you. I know exactly the same music as you. I'm getting to that point. So I'm going to be 30 this year. So I'm only just getting to the point where I'm getting away from the generation now. So I've had to adapt my youth work. So I can't just rely on knowing the current rap artists because I don't, and it hurts me really as much. So when I was younger, we used to listen to like grime and UK rap and things like that. Now they're listening to drill music, and I don't listen to drill music. So I've had to adapt because I can't automatically win over this young person just based over the fact that I know the same music as them. I have to use something else.
Yeah.
So I've had to adapt just based on that. And I think it's important as youth workers that you do adapt, because as much as you'd love to be 20 for the rest of your life, you're not going to be. And a person's going to relate to a 20-year-old differently than they're going to relate to a 40-year-old than what they're going to relate to a 60-year-old. No matter how cool that 40-year-old thinks they are, no matter how cool that 60-year-old thinks they are, that young person's going to look at you as, oh, okay. Yeah. So I've had to adapt, and I'm seeing it because I'm going through it right now. Like as we speak, I'm having to adapt. So if you look how I used to relate with young people 6 years ago, when I first came up to Leeds, it's completely different to how I relate to them now. One, because I've got more experience now as well. So when I first came to Leeds, I was a student. I'd just come out of Ilford. I was closer to my previous life, if you know what I mean, where I was doing things that maybe some of their friends were doing. Sure. So I was closer to that, so I can speak more about stuff that happened on the street and things like that, because it was much closer. But now I don't need to talk about that because I've got so much more different experience that I don't need to draw upon that anymore. So this is one reason why I don't talk about the stuff I did as a young person. I think for me, there's so many other people that can tell that story better than I could. Maybe it's because they were deeper into it or they had a bigger impact. But I talk about more what I've done recently now. So if I'm with a young person, I'll talk more about how I started a business rather than what I used to do when I was younger.
Yeah.
For me, sometimes people try and bring it out of me, and that's one thing that kind of annoys me sometimes. I could talk about knife crime, but that's not me. I'd rather talk about teaching a young person how to start a business or get into volunteering or these things. But that's only happened as I've got older.
Which is also a distraction away from knife crime anyway.
Yeah, no, of course. But I'm talking about...
This is what I mean. You don't have to talk about knife crime as a deterrent for knife crime.
Well, when I was 24, I would talk about the actual crime.
Yeah.
So when I was 24, I would have to talk about, don't go stab this person because you will go to jail.
Yeah.
That's what I would have to do at 24 because I haven't got the experience I have now. Now, what I can tell them is, do you know what? You can go to college and university. So it's still the deterrent from knife crime, but it's not as explicit as it would have needed to be when I was 24. And that's come with growth.
Yeah, I love that. And I think for me, that's very much, it's the truth, isn't it? In terms of the reality of all of us run organisations based on different life experience. But the hope is, and I guess for me, the hope is that my life experience will continue. Do you know what I mean? I'm not going to spend my whole life like just building on something that I did when I was younger. Like, one of the reasons why I love running stuff to Sierra Leone is because I've learned so much and I love it. And I've learned loads through it. So giving other people that opportunity is wonderful. It's a privilege. However, Do you know what I mean? There's a point where I'm hoping somebody else will run that. Do you know what I mean? And if that's what they choose to do, you know, but even if it just runs for this season, it's still been a wonderful privilege, and it's been, you know, part of my journey that I've enabled other people to do the same. And because I would hope that in time, whether or not somebody else takes on Running Re-Establish in the future, or whether or not Re-Establish as it is ceases to be, I have no idea, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Because I would hope that, you know, the right doors will open, because I'm doing what I do now because I believe in it right here, right now, and I think it makes a difference. I know it makes a difference, and so it's having that freedom to go, actually, if another door opens that you believe is right because of new life experience, then actually it may be that another project develops. You know, Re-Establish might become an umbrella for other things. It might not. You know, dependent on what happens in time and what that looks like.
I love that I named my company what I did, because I've had so many plugs in this conversation. Like,
It's all about you, Phil.
I know every time someone said it, I've looked at someone else for eye contact and go, and no one's looked at me. I'm like, is it just me that does that? But no, I genuinely appreciate the three of you coming on. When I knew that this was the topic I wanted to cover, you were the first three people I thought of. Luckily, all three of you said yeah. Would have been a bit awkward if we were like, no, didn't really want you here, but someone else said no, so here you are. But I genuinely love the work that you're all doing, and I'm not saying that as a blanket statement. Individually, I think you're all amazing people, and even though we're all trying to achieve the same thing, we do what we do in completely different ways, and I think it's important that we continue to do that, because it's not a one size fits all, and sort of the relationship building where we're referring people into each other's services and stuff is the only way that we're sort of going to make sure that we all continue to do this work. Please don't ever talk about retiring, any of you. I've got a friend called Becky who's a community organiser, and she's worried because people our age, if we stop organising things for the community, we don't have young and upcoming community leaders. So there's a big, this is it, who's going to take over when we're not doing this anymore. So the only solution is that we just continue to do this forever. Okay, shall we make a pact?
You know, just on that, one of the things I've noticed in the last few years, through some of the other work that I've done, training local authorities and police officers particularly, and going into quite rooms of quite well established people within their careers, so you top kind of people that sit within local authorities and councils, you top people that sit within government and police forces, and that imposter syndrome comes upon me quite regularly. And I hide it just by being loud and confident and stuff, pretend confidence. But I think one of the things that I've got through learning this kind of experience is I look at them all, and it's a sea of overly middle-aged people who are ready for retirement, not far off. So it's kind of brought me to this place of us, where we're at in our generation, we're the next ones to step up into these more well-established senior kind of roles and pave the way for the youth that we're working with. So you're right that we can't give up, because the people above us are ready to retire, which means it's left on us. We're the ones that are holding the baton now for us to be able to carry until we're at that age to then pass it down. So yeah, I think you're right. We can't give up, and we have to keep holding the baton for as long as we feel is the right time to do, and pass it on to someone else.
I don't think if you're wide like us, you ever retire.
No.
I think it's just part of. I do what I do because it's part of who I am. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think I believe in people's innate value. That will always be my driver, and I love that. It can be exhausting sometimes, but I wouldn't change it. And I think, like, I've learned what I've learned through experience. Like, I know that there's some great people, you know, who in the powers that be that make the decisions, that have awesome hearts. Do you know what I mean? And for me, it's looking at how they utilise their experience and their understanding, and how we can bring our experience together, and then how can we kind of infiltrate that through into the next generation as they come up with their ideas, and really look at that. And I think one of the things that I've really loved about lockdown, I'm not a big fan of lockdown, however,
I was going to say one of the things. There's many things you loved about lockdown, but one of them is this.
But no, like for me, it's just the partnership stuff that's come out of it. And you know, it's so easy to be so busy, but actually when you have to stop and go, okay, but we still need to continue to do stuff, how can we do that better together? It's actually enabled us to pause and go, okay, well, how do we move this forward? I've met more people in this last little season that are doing really, really cool things. Do you know, I mean, just like through this kind of stuff too, that I never would have met, like had lockdown not happened, probably, because we wouldn't have had the time to set it up or to make it happen, or to you know, to reflect in different ways. We've used other centres that we wouldn't have used before. We've made connections that we wouldn't necessarily have made just because we were too busy doing the stuff that we were doing on the ground. And actually, for me, that's one of my hopes that comes out of this, is that we actually learn that together we can be stronger. I know it's a bit cliche, but looking at how do we link better? You know, what does that look like? You know, who have I met that actually knows this area far better than I do? You know, whether I can go, okay, I'm totally learning on my feet here. Do you know what I mean? Like, can you help me? And for that to be okay, and which then gives permission for other people to do exactly the same. And so I hope that that's definitely something positive that comes out of, you know, the last season is how do we pause and take time? You know, like I think one of the things that I found interesting, just in the basics of going back onto the roads and stuff, you would have hoped that through lockdown we would have learnt a little bit of patience. People seem more impatient on the road than they've ever been. But for me, that's a really sad reflection, because actually this could be a defining moment in a shift in society in terms of how do we move forwards. You know, how can we do this together? Let's not just go back to how things have been, but let's look at how we can really very genuinely move forward collectively, because it is in the best interest of local community. And that might be pockets of local community, it might be bigger city stuff, but actually that's okay. And to just empower that stuff because it works, because it's about that community. And it will look different, won't it, for the different communities in different ways, because we're all innate in that sense, and there's different needs in different places, but the principles are the same. You know, like the hope is that we leave something that benefits the local community in the longer term, and whether or not that's investing in individual people's lives or whether or not that's leaving a collective bigger organisation, who knows? But actually, if we can create something better and stronger together, that's about, you know, making a difference in the community, I guess.
What a way to finish.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank
Wise
you very
words.
much for that, Joe.
Thanks for having
And
us.
yeah, and thanks for coming on. Yeah, I appreciate all of you. Thank you.
Anytime. Thank you.